So what really interests me about AR is being able to tell a more complete story than what your eyes see at a glance.
We had an 11-foot mech that was like steel, and it had solenoids in it that would like go like dun, 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 dun.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that Lauren had this amazing career going from one company to another, huge names. Ehren did a lot of stuff. Give us a little intro about what you've been doing and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so my first career was video games. So the first company I ever worked at was Zynga, and then they became Proletariat, that sort of spun out. I was working there for a while, and then I bopped around like every studio in Boston, whatever people would pay me to do, because it was like a weird time in games. So I was doing a lot of contract work. And then I was at Phenomena for a while, and the last big title that I worked on was Monument Valley 2. And then from there, I stepped out of games, and I was a prototyper at Apple for a while, working on AR things. And then I was the creative director for XR at Meow Wolf. And then I started Refract Studios, which is the studio where I'm at now. And we do all sorts of AR experiments. We do a lot of design fiction, so sort of creating prototypes and putting them out on the internet so that others can, help us make choices about what we want AR to look like in the future. And then we also do a lot of more sort of art-based projects, which is how I met Ehren. We worked on one of those together. So, Ehren.
Yeah, so I wish I could say I'm in the professional world of video games, but I am just a gamer, and I'm an artist as a profession. So I got involved in Lauren's project, Ojos Diferentes, as an artist, looking to express beyond, the kind of more tangible mediums. And I was linked up with Lauren through an article in the newspaper where me and a friend of mine, his name's Dylan Tenorio, another amazing environment artist, we had this idea of creating the sort of civic center, the center of our town of Santa Fe, recreating that in the game of Minecraft, to engage with youth around the topic of monuments. In Santa Fe, there was an obelisk monument in the center of our plaza that was destroyed and torn down by protesters. And it was a big topic of conversation of what should we do now? Now that it's torn down, should we build something new? Should we leave the area just a blank slate? And we were really interested in what the youth thought about that. So we recreated the plaza to scale and complete with the obelisk, and allowed the students to come in and interact with the environment and make their own impressions about the future of our plaza and the monuments and that topic. So it was in the newspaper, and we were looking for a way to expand on this project, and Lauren reached out with Ojos Diferentes.
Thank you so much for those intros. Lauren, you kind of touched on this topic of AR, and this is where I want to go a little bit. AR and VR probably blew up, although those technologies probably have been around for a while. They blew up like 5-6 years ago. I remember when we just kind of started doing 80 level. In the first couple of years, it was all about AR and VR. Then it kind of like died down a little bit, and my question is like, what's going on with this field now? Like, what are maybe the products or technologies or, experiences that you feel you kind of need to have a look at if you want to understand the current status of what AR is?
Yeah, I feel like we had this weird 2 years where like I've been working in AR and VR like since the the first Oculus Kickstarter, which like I have a lot of colleagues and stuff who worked in it longer, but like that's a fair amount of time. Like for a long time, it wasn't that cool. Like it was like kind of the like there was a couple nerds who were like we were like into this thing and people were like, oh, like that's interesting. And then like all of a sudden it blew up and we were all like talking about the metaverse and like this was going to change everything in the next like year. And I think a lot of us who have been like working with technology for a while in the hardware were like, I don't know about that. And now that's sort of like coming around and I think people are feeling a bit burned by that they're like, hey, like this was all promised. And it's like, it's actually going to take a lot longer to get there because there's like really hard hardware problems to solve. But I think what we can do right now, because I do think that those hardware problems will be solved, is start asking questions about like, how do we want this to interact in our lives? Like, how do we want it to be in our personal spaces, in our public spaces, in our work life? Like, what does privacy mean? Do we want cameras on our faces when we go to the bathroom? Those sorts of things. Because a lot of those questions are being answered like behind closed doors on tech campuses. So like one of the things that we want to do with the videos that we put out is to like start engaging that in more of a public conversation.
So talking about those videos that you've been putting out, I think if you took us like 10 years ago, when you think about AR, everybody would start saying, you know, like Minority Report, you know, Tom Cruise doing like crazy things, or you know, computers seeing your eye and then starting popping ads just directly into your brain or something like that. Yet your approach to AR is so different. It's kind of like more practical, kind of more down to earth, I would say. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy and maybe talk a little bit about the baking video that I hopefully will be able to share a little bit in this recording?
Yeah, so there's two things that I like seeing with AR. One of them is making art, which I'll let Ehren sort of speak to that a little later. But when we're talking about like really practical applications with AR, like your face is a really big ask for you to ask somebody like put something on, like versus like my wrist or like a thing that's in my pocket. So if I'm going to be putting things in your field of view and I'm asking you to wear glasses, then the thing better be really, really adding to my experience of the world. So like, could it be done better with like physical objects or on a phone or on a watch? And if the answer is yes, then like I don't really want it. Are you removing friction from an experience for me? So that was the big thing with the baking video. Is it was like, how do I remove friction from this experience of like baking at home? If I have multiple timers, because I'm making like caramel and the cookies, can I put the timers directly over the pots so I'm not like looking at the timers on my phone? And can I pin the recipe to a wall so I'm not like getting my phone all dirty? And those sorts of things. Can I see the temperature change in the oven live? So what are the points of friction that I can remove without interrupting the actual like baking experience? That said, like, I don't know that I would actually do this for home baking. So I actually think that the prototype that I made probably makes more sense in a commercial kitchen. But and there's lots of like good questions about like safety for you know, having your hand around heat or steaming up glasses and that sort of thing. But it was actually I made that prototype in like a couple hours because it was home at Christmas with my dad, and he was like, I don't understand what you do. And I was like, okay, well, like, what if you were going to bake something, right? And like, we need to figure out how we might improve doing this. Like, you could do this and you could do this. And then I would make a video, and then we show that video to, you know, people, and then they decide whether they want it or not. And then it sort of blew up on the internet.
Thank you, Lauren. And I want to touch about this idea of using AR for art. And Ehren, the question for you is, we have a community of video game artists on 80 level. We have like environment guys, character artists, so many. Most of them are, when they're thinking about their presentation or thinking about creating projects, they're usually thinking about, Unreal Engine or Unity or somewhere where you can experience a game on a flat screen, let's say, right? So it's either TV or a monitor. What do you think are the things that are really peculiar about AR, and how does it, spice up the production of art? What are like the particular interesting elements there? How does it elevate this whole process?
So I want to answer that question with a little bit of a background of who I am as a person. So I'm originally from Santa Fe, but my people are from a place called Santo Domingo Pueblo. We're a Native American tribe that has been here forever, and we're known for our arts. And one thing that really strikes me when I am exhibiting my work is the amount of people that are interested and want to know more. And there's something about our way of creating that there's always a story involved to what we're doing. There's so much meaning and purpose behind why we create and what we are creating and bringing into this world. So what I love about this concept of utilizing AR is that it gives people a chance to interact with the art and see beyond what's right in front of their eyes. There's a chance for us to tell much more meaningful and deeper stories within AR. For example, somebody could go into a regular museum, they look at an object and they see a side that explains the history, where it came from, something like that. Well, with AR, you could actually scan the object, maybe see it in 3D and see beyond that object. Maybe you could see how it's been applied, or a backstory to it, or maybe there's music that goes along with it. In our beliefs, it's commonplace that the art doesn't exist as a singular being. It's connected to music and dance, and it's a paraphernalia for ceremony, and all of these things combined into one. So what really interests me about AR is being able to tell a more complete story than what your eyes see at a glance.
This is something that kind of a lot of people in games are actually using in AR. If you go to any, at least they used to do it, like if you go at an event done by Unity or any other kind of tech provider, you would go there and you would see like all this kind of like augmented elements that you're adding with new tools. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, perceived in a VR goggles or some kind of like fancy glasses. Sometimes it's just a phone, right? So it's like you put a camera somewhere and then the things are popping up. And I feel like it's a great way to enhance all those experiences and tell about other cultures and tell stories and improve the stories being told kind of like in real time. To kind of build on that, where do you see in the current kind of state some of the best examples of using AR? Like what companies or maybe what products are really doing a very good job? It doesn't have to be like an entertainment. Maybe there's something done in medical science. Maybe there's something done in some other places. Who's doing a good job with kind of like utilizing it?
Oh gosh, I cannot remember the name of the company. But there's a woman, and she won the hackathon, I think, at AWE last year. And her product is that there you can put a QR code on the side of a building that's being constructed, and then it pulls up all of the sort of city documents and petitions, anything to do with the construction of that building within the community. But then you can also see in AR like what it's going to look like, which is super relevant if you have questions about stuff like, how is this gonna like mean that the playground next door is in constant shade, those sorts of things. So I think that that's really interesting. Honestly, well, yeah, I'll talk Ehren up. I think that like his piece that he did for Ojos was really cool. And like in particular places like AR is special because you can put things in space, right? Like it's spatial computing. And like it's nice to be able to put things agnostically anywhere in the world, but I think the stuff that I get really excited about are things that are like really, really rooted to a particular place and that don't work somewhere else, and that help you because like you can travel back in time or forward in time, or you can see that place totally differently, and that for me feels like the magic of it. So Ehren's piece was about the Santa Fe River, and like you go on this, like you wear a time machine, that's like a keto that he made. And well, I'll let you speak to your work, Ehren.
Sure. Yeah, I agree, Lauren. This was a really incredible endeavor. As an artist working on the project, there's such an opportunity to speak about what's hidden below the layers of what's in front of you, right? So it's been a long history in Santa Fe that there's these colonial structures built directly on top of our sacred spaces, which were long stewarded here in Santa Fe by the Tewa people. So I looked at it as an opportunity to make commentary and have fun with that concept. And really what I was trying to show with my piece was that we have a resiliency that has allowed us to surpass all of the assimilation and all of the really tragic things that have been happening to our people since colonists arrived. What I wanted to show was that through all of that, we had a resiliency through our sense of humor. And so my piece is sort of a comical look through time. And the question was, what would happen if these different timelines of the future, the past and the present here in Santa Fe overlapped? And so you get to experience this time warp. And if you, it's so much to explain, but if you have a chance to check it out, I would recommend it. There's a lot of commentary on, the things that have happened, and yeah, there's not much more for me to say.
Ehren, we're gonna put all the links in the description to the video, so people will be able to download and play around with it. So, to kind of like add to the things that you were saying, this all seems like a very exciting thing. I can already see people trying to play around with, either the case that Lauren told us about, kind of using it in development, or trying to build a different story, because there's like so much that you can do with it, turned it in so many different ways. You talked about Ocarina of Time. I think Nintendo really knows how to take like a simple gamepad and just throw it like a million different ways in a different direction. Every time there's something new. There's like layers and layers and layers of stuff you can do additionally with AR. And my question is, if somebody wants to start exploring it more, kind of trying to understand how this medium works and how is it different from like traditional stuff. I'm saying like traditional as if 3D graphic is something that we've been living in forever, which is not, but still. Maybe some technologies, maybe some tools, maybe some hardware that is essential, sort of like to start understanding the potential of this whole thing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of free tools out there. The one that I genuinely recommend people start with is Lens Studio, which is from Snap. It's free. You do have to have a Snapchat account. I'm sorry, my TV just turned on by itself. I'll be right back.
I guess I can say one that Lauren turns me on to was Scaniverse, where you use your cell phone camera to scan an object, and from every angle, 360 degrees. And once you're done with the scan, you can turn that object and look at all the different areas. And I love this. I love this because as an artist that creates, I've created a lot of small scale sculptures using, silver and turquoise and different kind of stones. And these sculptures are very high value. They can be very delicate, and so a lot of times the audience or the customer or the client is kind of afraid to pick them up, or you sometimes they have a high insurance value and you don't want them to pick it up. So Scaniverse allows that person to actually take that object, spin it around, look at all of the details that wouldn't normally be available to them, especially if it's in a display case or something like that.
Yeah, I love Scaniverse, especially for traditional artists. One of the other artists that we work with on Ojos was a guy named Virgil Ortiz, who makes these like really intricate heads, and they're ceramic, and like they're usually about this big, but he wanted to have his be like massive. So it's the size of you. So for like a traditional artist, I think Scaniverse and stuff like that is like super cool because you can like make a little maquette, scan it, pop it into Lens Studio, and then you can make it the size of a building. And like that's just like a really cool experience. It's an exercise that I've done with schools when sort of introducing programming, because you can do it really, really quickly. But yeah, I really like Lens Studio. I think it's a great tool. There's Spark AR, though I think that like you sort of like level out on Spark pretty quickly. It's pretty basic. And Unity is also really interesting. I think like this year is probably going to bring us more platforms and more places to put this sort of work. So, we'll see.
Yeah, when you're talking about those tools, I also think about, the hardware, how you can experience it. And I feel like this is something that's really kind of like ready almost for the market, because you do need this device that's going to change the way that you're experiencing these kind of things. So kind of like not to push it on you through like traditional media, but kind of like really, because like even the introduction of like QR codes, like you said, this is not really super big in US, but like if you go to China, this is everywhere. Like everything, like payments are done that way, any kind of connection is done that way. These are kind of like those little elements that if they start popping up in our cities or in our lives, this is where AR can really, blow up. And to kind of like thinking about the perspectives or things that might happen or where it's going to go. Ehren and Lauren, can you give me like your thoughts on the future outlook? Like where do you feel AR is going to be in, 5 years? What other interesting cases do you see of it being used, both in games and outside of games? But also, how are we going to experience it? Is it going to be, glasses? Are we going to use phones? Maybe our TV are going to start supporting AR. Like, what's your take?
I don't know. What would your hopes be, Ehren?
I would like to see it utilized sort of how you're talking about, more just in commonplace. I imagine it replacing a business card, instead of having this like little simple contact information on a piece of paper, you could scan something and there you have an entire experience of who that person is. I feel like for artists especially, it gives such a great opportunity for expression.
Yeah, I love that. Like an experience business card. That's such a cool idea. Yeah, I think it's making predictions about things 5 years from now with emerging technology is a losing game. I do think that I think we're probably going to see some interesting hardware coming out in the next 2 years, and then how that ends up being received is going to be you know, what happens with this technology. Like for a person who has a company which is based around XR, which like we say we're an emerging technology studio because we do all kinds of stuff, but like most of our work is XR. Like I still only give it, maybe 50, 60 shot. Like I think this technology could still fail. Like maybe we don't solve the hardware problems. Maybe it doesn't get adapted. Maybe it ends up being the PlayStation instead of the iPhone. Like I think those are all still possible worlds, and I'm not bullish on it in that way. But like I think my ideal world would be something that's lightweight, that like it's on when I need it. I don't want to be obscuring my vision and putting like stuff in the world all the time. But I can definitely see the world in which being able to do that is useful, which is why I do the work that I do. But not quite, Kichi's hyper reality, if you're familiar with the video. Hopefully something a little bit lighter, and that has, hopefully we've also figured out the privacy stuff too with cameras.
Yeah, hyper reality was intense. We talked about it, I think, on our call when we were preparing for this, and I had a look at it. And this is like something that internet looked like in the 90s, where it's just like banners everywhere and it's like ads everywhere. So you definitely want to avoid that. I also like your honesty, Lauren, in terms of like the 50, like 40-60 approach. I think it's a very good approach, especially coming from a person who's doing this professionally and worked like in a bunch of those companies. I do have talking about chances and kind of like ambitious projects. Do you feel like XR and AR, do you feel like they have a chance to connect more with this idea of metaverse that people are throwing around? Like obviously Meta is doing a bunch of work there. What's your take on it? Like, is this how we're going to experience, social connections and internet in the future, or do you have some other vision?
I still don't know what the metaverse is. I don't know what people mean by metaverse still. Like, is it Web3? Is it like a connected world? Is it Second Life, but like in VR? So I think, and I hear different answers every time I talk to people about it. So I like, personally, I think the word metaverse is probably going to go in the direction of like the World Wide Web, or, like surfing and like those sorts of things, which like sounded really like high tech and like cool at a certain point in time, but like, they're very of their era. So I think, I don't think the word means that much. But I got all the time in the world for the people who are actually making stuff. Yeah.
Ehren, what about you? What's your take on this?
I thought that was very thoughtful, Lauren.
Thanks.
And I think that I think it's like a really like, I don't know, when you think of the future and like science fiction, there's some aspect to it that's just, I don't see how it can replace reality. And that's why I like AR, is because it's working within it's augmented reality. I don't think that there can be a replacement. But if we can imagine it, it's like chips in our brain and we're in this sort of matrix world sort of thing. So yeah, it's a little far off for me to think about, but I have all kinds of, I can imagine all kinds of different realities with that. And I feel like maybe AI is a part of that too. Just because you can see so many different variables play out right before your eyes.
I think it was a very cool answer, and I like this. Again, sort of like no pink glasses approach, where you look at the real world, which is still gonna be, the thing where you interact with most of the stuff. It's not that they're gonna go and throw out garbage in the, in the metaverse, and then suddenly it disappears from your home, right? So there's still some parts of life that are essential, and not necessarily that you need to cut down on them or like get rid of them. Like I think, communication with friends and family, this is still something that you want to experience face to face and not do it like through VR goggles.
Yeah, I love what you said about like the real world and why that's interesting for augmented reality. Which like I actually don't do a lot of virtual reality projects. Most of my work is in AR, and I think like I'm really interested in the real world. Like it's got plenty of problems, but like I'm invested in this one, and I hope other people stay invested in the real world that we're in, and we don't all decide to like, get a head jack and like plug into the matrix. But like I think that's where the medium shines too, is when you can take like unexpected places like a parking lot and make them feel magical, which was actually something we learned at Meow Wolf. So we made this thing called the Garage, which was like this big magic leap thing. We had actors wearing magic leaps, and it was in an actual auto garage, and we had an 11-foot mech that was like steel, and it had solenoids in it that would like go like don 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 don, and like you'd get up on the mech and you'd wear the magic leap, and you'd go on the solar system ride, and it was a really high production thing. And then there was also a wooden box bolted to the floor of the shop from Home Depot that we couldn't figure out how to get the bolts out, so we couldn't move the box. So we were like, well, put some deer in the box. They're space deer. Like it's something, we just got to do something with the box. And people who went through the experience would go to the box, and then they would stand there for like 10 minutes, and they would be like, this is amazing. And then the first thing that people did when they got up on the mech was they took their headset off. Because I think it was so overwhelming. Because you have no expectations of like what a mech is going to be like. So there's nothing to subvert, which is what's interesting about augmented reality, right? Is that it's going to do something different. And so like a box, you have a lot of expectations about. You're like, it holds about this much space, and like it doesn't hold universes full of like space deer. So the fact that it was like tickling that part of your brain, you're like, oh, this is not how this is supposed to work. Like I think there's something there. So like you have to start with something rooted in reality with augmented reality, or else like you're just what are you adding to the experience, right? Which I think is like a pretty common, and it was my rookie mistake with the mech, right? Is like putting your AR on your most beautiful stuff, because like you might want to just leave your most beautiful things in the real world alone, and then look at the places where you can like pull out those stories and like create subverted expectations more.
What is the game that you feel is like the best game of all time? Like what is the game that kind of like in your pantheon is like on the first step?
I think Shadow of the Colossus. That was the game that made me want to make games. Like I replayed it recently too, and the like pain of like knowing that you're doing this thing that's like probably wrong, and like going through this desolate landscape and all of it. I think it's like a masterpiece.
Ehren, what about you?
I'm going to have to go with Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda. Because it was, I grew up with Nintendo NES and seeing the evolution to the N64 and playing games that were 3D with so much content within the game. Really, it changed my life.
It's funny that you guys both mentioned Japanese developers. When I think about it, like this country really gave us like a bunch of stuff in terms of like our medium, and they keep reinventing, adding more and more stuff. And I like the examples that you gave, because they are kind of like a different approaches to the same thing. Like in Ocarina of Time, there's like so much content, and you kind of discover, and there's like different mechanics, and everything's kind of like puts everything together. And when you're thinking about Shadow of Colossus, it's almost kind of like addition by subtraction. There's like this huge world. There's like basically there's nothing much that you can do except for fighting those beasts. And that is a game that came out at the PlayStation 2 era. And even like at that time, that was like such a huge technical breakthrough. I remember it was like maybe 25 frames per second, so it was like pretty laggy. But boy, that was such an amazing game. Yeah, I loved it. So, kind of on the topic of games, we talked about like these titles. Everybody probably knows them. What about the games that you feel are great, but are a little bit undervalued? Something that you can have a look at, something that's kind of like below the radar and not a lot of people know about it.
There's a game called Bury Me, My Love, which I feel like it was well loved within the indie community, but it's not seen much outside. And you're playing, it's a phone game, and you're texting with someone. And you're a Syrian refugee who's trying to make their way out of Syria to meet your partner in Germany. And it happens in real time over a week. So you receive text messages from her as she's traveling. And then she'll ask you stuff like, okay, like I have 400 rupees. Should I buy a flashlight or a life vest? Yeah, like don't play it if you like don't have emotional space that week. It's a very, very intense experience, but I think it's really beautiful and really well done.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a hard question for me. I think of so many games. I was really that type of gamer that would just play everything. And especially when emulators kind of came out and were more accessible, I tried every game that came on NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis. One of the games that came up for me that I still remember playing as a child, it was called Lester the Unlikely. And I loved it because the character, it was one of the early games on Super NES, and the character had so much emotion. You could really see him reacting to different situations. And that was something that I hadn't seen in NES, was a lot of life and expression in the character. So it's a hidden gem, but it's not that fun. Once I play it now, it really doesn't have too much going on for it. But that was something that I started to notice different in this 16-bit era.
That's awesome, guys. I haven't played any of those, so I think our readers probably haven't either. It's nice to kind of throw this around in the ether so people can kind of explore other products. Lauren and Ehren, thank you so much. I think that you gave so much information today. Your answers are so insightful and great. I love all of it, and thank you for sharing the tools as well, and the project that you have been working on. We'll leave the links in the description so people can explore, have a look at it, and maybe start dabbling with AR and XR in the future. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with all your future projects.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great. Have a good one.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.